Dear Void, most people don't even know it. They have heard of it, they may be familiar with the name, but they probably can't even find it on the map. And yet, their lives have been shaped by one small-sized Arab country, Qatar. And in the last few decades, Qatar has invested billions of dollars in universities in the West, especially in the US and the UK, but in other Western countries as well. In the US alone, between 2000 and 2021, they invested $4.3 billion in universities. Take a moment to think about it. This tiny country from the Middle East, about 12,000 kilometers away, which most Americans don't even know, invested $4.3 billion in US universities. And this is not a conspiracy theory, this is a known fact. You can find it online. Hell, even Wikipedia, which usually tries to hide or distort such facts, show them openly. So why? Why would they do that? What do they care so much what American kids are learning, or British kids, or Albanian kids for that matter? To answer that, you should also point your attention to Al Jazeera. I'm always amazed that people don't know what Al Jazeera is. They think it's just an Arab news agency. It is not. It is owned and operated solely by the Qatari government. It is operating in dozens of languages around the world in about 150 territories. It has a presence online in several languages. It is a huge machine, and all of it, 100%, is owned, financed, and managed by the Qatari government. And it's not making money. It's losing money. The revenue it makes from ads is a tiny fraction of the operation costs. And once again, none of what I'm telling you is a conspiracy theory. It's a well-documented and public fact. You can even find some of it in Al Jazeera's own websites. They aren't hiding anything. So you have this tiny, not so known, but extremely wealthy Arab country investing billions in universities in the West and investing billions in a supposed news network around the globe, all of the while not seeing any profit from it, not now, not ever. So why do it? The answer is influence and control. And once again, this is such common and on-the-surface knowledge, not denied by anyone, that even if you ask ChatGPT about it, it will tell you, yep, that's pretty much the strategy. Which is why Qatar is the smartest and most dangerous villain of the world today. Because their tactic is absolutely genius. I cannot tell you how much I admire their strategy. Of all of Israel's foes, I would say Qatar is without a doubt, in my mind, the most worthy and dangerous one. See, while the Iranians got addicted to hearing their own voices, and they would stand on stages and bluster threats and put up a clock in the square of Tehran counting down Israel's days, all that bullshit, and publicly and noisily starting and supporting terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, Qatar took a very different route, a much more effective one. You never know they're there, but they're everywhere. You never hear them. They never give fiery speeches. They never threaten war or any violence of any kind. But they did draw some heat from the Arab nations. Between 2017 and 2021, there was a boycott of Qatar by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and Bahrain. The reasons were two. One, Qatar direct support of radical Islamist organizations tied to the Muslim Brotherhood like Hamas, organizations that usually threaten the stability of the moderate regimes. And two, Qatar's constant incitement against those regimes in Al Jazeera in Arabic. But in 2021, Qatar has proven that their strategy has worked, as the US, with the assistance of Kuwait, made the moderate Arab nations abandon their boycott without Qatar really changing anything. The Arab nations folded, because they had to take into account several things. First, the boycott did very little to affect Qatar's economy as time went by, since most of it is based on exporting oil and gas outside of the Arab world anyway. They also were clever enough to diversify their economy by investing in real estate and tourism. So Qatar was not affected. And second, the moderate Arab countries have an interest in keeping the US happy. And the US wants their bases in Qatar and the ability to work and coordinate from there with their bases in the rest of the Middle East. A boycott on Qatar collided with the American plans, pure and simple. In short, Qatar has made itself too important to boycott, something that Iran could never do. Honestly, Qatar is like the genius kid with 200 IQ, and Iran is like the slow kid that bullies everyone, but we all know they'll end up flipping burgers probably for the rest of their lives. And that's why Qatar is so dangerous. Their influence is already felt across the West. In the last 2 years, after the 7th of October, we saw a burst of anti-Semitism in the West on a scale we haven't seen since the 1930s. And in universities, especially those bought by Qatar, it was the worst. But notice something else. It went beyond just hating Jews. It went into celebrating Islam, Arabs, and even Islamism. We saw stupid kids performing the Muslim prayer stance. We saw the kafia, a Middle Eastern garment worn by Middle Eastern Jews as well, not specifically an Arab one, becoming a symbol of anti-Semitism and pro-Arabism. These were no coincidences. These were not behaviors that happened in a vacuum. These were the results of years and years of indoctrination by Qatar. And indeed, as more details came into light, we discovered that in Western universities under the Qatari regime's control, cells of Hamas, which they openly sponsor, were allowed to walk freely amongst the students, even though Hamas is an illegal prescribed terror organization in most Western countries. They were allowed to preach freely their evil doctrine, to print and give out flyers and propaganda material. We learned that Jewish history was completely absent from the curriculum, even though the entire Western world is based on it. We learned that when Zionism was being taught at all, it was being taught as this race theory that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. The Palestinian narrative is all that these kids have ever heard, and not just any Palestinian narrative, specifically the Islamist, extremist version of the most heinous, disgusting, twisted organization that Palestinian society has ever created. And considering the levels of anti-Semitism in Palestinian society, that says a lot. And then there was the indoctrination by Al Jazeera. This is beyond brilliant. This is pure genius. Because outside of the Arab world, Qatar was very careful to make sure that Al Jazeera behaves like a Western outlet. So while their reporters would say incredibly anti-Semitic things in Arabic, like Holocaust denial, justifying Hitler, pushing all the old anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, in the West, especially in English, they never did that. The only time that they got into hot water was a Holocaust denial piece that found its way onto their AJ Plus platform. But for the most part, they pretend to be legitimate. And they'll cover normal everyday news like everyone else, even hiring sometimes real reporters rather than just Qatari mouthpieces. And so, considering the average Westerner's knowledge of history and global affairs is basically identical to that of a retarded chimp, they became convinced that Al Jazeera is a very reliable source for foreign affairs. And the anti-Jewish and anti-Israel stuff was sprinkled very cleverly between the legitimate stories. You never hear a single positive thing about Jews or Israel. It's all negative, it's all lies, but it's not constant. It's sprinkled between legitimate news pieces, which gives it an air of legitimacy. And that's what makes all the difference. See, if someone stands on a stage with a funny little mustache and screams about Judens, Westerners know by now to ignore him. But if you give them a negative story a day about Jews, drip in it, drop by drop, like an IV of hate poison, it becomes part of them before they even know what happened. Add to that the way anti-Semitism is anyway embedded into Western culture, and you don't need much to trigger the same exact response that the little midget with the funny mustache triggered. And you want to know the real kick to the teeth in all of this? Qatar doesn't really care about Israel. Not really. The support of Hamas and the Palestinians is not derived from a nationalist or a religious emotion. They are not that religious. In fact, in their own country, they're more relaxed than Saudi Arabia, by a lot. And they are not emotional. They are cold and calculated. Honestly, under different circumstances, they'd be my heroes. So, what's the obsession with Israel? Well, it's their obsession with being the big boss of the Arab world. See, because for the past 77 years, Israel has been unbeatable and has humiliated its foes from the Arab world repeatedly, it became a sort of the ultimate prize for whoever manages to finally defeat it. That's the main reason the Iranians want to destroy Israel too. Whoever manages it would gain immediate and immense popularity and fidelity in the Arab world specifically and in the Muslim world in general. We've become the Excalibur of the Arab world. The Palestinian nonsense is a scam. Always was, and the Qataris are aware of that. All of the Arab nations are aware of that. But it is used as a weapon because Israel is viewed above all as a hit to Arab pride, because it was the source of so many humiliations throughout the decades. Now, most moderate countries do not think the price is worth it anymore and actually want to maintain peaceful, economically beneficial relations with Israel. But Qatar is punching above its weight here, and I'm talking in its attempt to become the big dog in the Arab world when it's kind of a small one. And they need a big achievement if they are to gain the loyalty and respect of the Arab street. So that's where the support of the Palestinians comes from, and why they criticize their Arab neighbors for their failure against Israel. And that's why they poison the West against Israel, because they subscribe to the idea that if Israel is abandoned by the West, it will become vulnerable and easier to take. And their name will be all over this imaginary future genocidal victory. So how do you fight such a juggernaut? How do you fight someone who is actually smart, unlike most of our enemies and haters in the West? Because that's what makes them dangerous. We are used to fighting idiots. The Qataris are anything but. So how do you beat them? Well, you out-clever them. You need to make their efforts not worth it. If the Arab street does not view the destruction of Israel as a triumph, the Qataris would lose interest and will try to reposition themselves accordingly. There are other ways of doing it, of course, but the thing is we need to disrupt the political climate in the Arab world in order to disrupt their plans. The Qatar situation is one of the main reasons I keep saying that Israel needs to get closer to the Arab world. And I don't just mean diplomatically. In fact, most of all, I mean the actual Arab street, the people. And unlike what people think, it's very doable. Because like I keep saying over and over, unlike the West, where they hate us because it's embedded into their culture, the Arab hate for us is maintained by lies and propaganda. Many Israelis who try to communicate with Arabs were surprised by both their acceptance and the ignorance that guides them. I've had the same experiences myself. I talked to many people in the last 2 years, online, in VR, wherever I could. And I wouldn't tell you that I didn't meet Arabs that just yelled at me racial slurs and threats and ran away like children. Of course there were those examples too. There are 500 million Arabs in the world. Even if only 30% of them are fucking morons, that's still millions and millions and millions of people. But in my own experience, in 75% of the cases or so, even if they started from a very hostile place, when they've learned facts that they didn't know, the conversation became calmer and they became inquisitive. For example, I cannot tell you how many Arabs I met who were sure there weren't any Jews in the land of Israel, what they call Palestine, until the 1940s. Because that's what they were told. So when I told them that I grew up in a city, Rishon LeZion, that was founded in 1882, and prove it to them by using Arabic Wikipedia, they realized they've been lied to and started asking more questions. And you know what? I learned a lot from them too, about how they feel about us, about Jews, about the West, about themselves. These interactions never happened to me with a Westerner. Let me repeat that. Never! Not once! Every time a Westerner comes at me with misinformation and hate, there's no one behind the wheel. There's no one to talk to. They see red. No evidence will change their minds. And it's 100% of the time. Not once did I experience anything different. With Arabs, people who behave like that exist, of course, but in my personal experience, they are the minority. Not the people who hate us are a minority, they are a majority. But the people who will not be receptive to new information are a minority. And the reason they don't know anything is because we are not even present in the game. At all. It's ridiculous. We're wasting our time advocating to the West, where there's no one behind the wheel, and we never talk to the Arab world, where people are actually smart. All they hear is anti-Semitic propaganda day in and day out, and it's all based on lies. So we need to invest in communicating with the people. We need to learn from the smart boys of our neighborhood, Qatar. We need to invest in a news agency as well as a social media presence that will not be dedicated to Israel or fighting anti-Semitism, but be a completely normal and legitimate news agency, hiring local reporters to talk about issues that are in the local population's interest. And just like the Qataris are dripping poison into the veins of Westerners slowly, here and there, we need to drip wisdom and knowledge into the veins of the Arab world, to make them see us Jews as we truly are, and hear the truth about Israel, both the current truth and the historical truth, which is kept from them. People need to get it through their heads that the hate in the Arab street for us is based on 90% lies and propaganda. If we change the hearts of the people, not the leaders, the people, we would pull the rug from under our haters' feet. And I mean in the Middle East, where it matters, not in the West, where, no action and definitely not the opinion of Arabs would ever matter to them. The West has fallen. Our future is with our cousins in our own neighborhood. We need to do as Qatar does. And what they are doing is controlling the board. What they are doing is spreading their influence and control. We need to listen carefully, watch closely, and take notes. We need to be smart, like the Qataris.